Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar on M365 Copilot. I'm Revat Sharma, Data Architect at MDS, and I'll just give a brief overview of MDS before handing it over to our colleague, Andrew, who will be walking you through the presentation. So MDS is a leading IT solution and professional services provider specializing in cloud computing, cybersecurity, data analytics, and digital transformation. With 3 decades of experience, we help enterprises optimize their IT infrastructure, enhance security, and leverage cutting edge technologies like AI, ML, and hybrid cloud solutions. So we have with us Andrew from TD SYNNEX, who's going to walk you through this webinar. Uh, Welcome, Andrew. It's over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to each and every one of you. We always appreciate the fact that you're willing to give us some of your time, and this is a topic that continues to be of great interest to most businesses. And I mean AI generally, talking about artificial intelligence, but more specifically, Microsoft 365 Copilot. What is this thing and how do we use it? Why should we use it? And therefore, I'm going to give you a high-level overview, but I'm going to also spend some time speaking to you a little bit. Well, spend some time speaking to you a little bit. I'm going to be speaking to you, especially about the security side of things, because if there is one thing that stands out and creates some separation between Microsoft 365 Copilot and the other AI tools, it revolves around the security aspects of things. And so I'm going to just highlight that, call that out, and hopefully get you thinking about why this is actually the optimal solution when it comes to AI tools for business, or your business. And so, in fact, it is going to be about the business case for Microsoft 365 Copilot around things like ROI, efficiency, impact, and security. All right, so from an overview perspective, let's look at it this way. Microsoft 365 Copilot can really be characterized, summarized, if you will, in these six categories. 2 times 3. So let's go through them, all right? It is the UI for AI. It's the user interface for artificial intelligence. You can engage with Copilot chat with a standardized user experience across web, desktop, and mobile. And when I say Copilot chat, in particular, I'm talking about what exists for anyone to use. So there is Microsoft 365 Copilot. There is Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. Copilot Chat is the feature that you can actually use and start using on the web. If you go to copilot.microsoft.com, you can start using it. If you have a Microsoft 365 subscription or an Office 365 subscription, you could actually go to m365copilot.com. So let me say that again, m365copilot.com. If you go there and you have already logged in with your work credentials, you're going to get a protected version of Copilot for the web. That is significant because it means that it's a protected version compared to the other AI tools that are out there. And so now you can use Copilot on the web, or you can use the Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription. And what's different between those two? The key difference is that if you have the subscription, Microsoft 365 Copilot, it's going to add AI to each of your Microsoft 365 apps. So that means when you're in Teams, you can work with AI in the form of Copilot. If you're in Outlook, you can work with AI in your Outlook email. If you're in PowerPoint, if you're in Excel, etc. That's the benefit of Microsoft 365 Copilot that does not exist with Copilot for the web. Copilot for the web will still do excellent things for you. You can upload your Word documents to work with them there. Fantastic. It is the web version. You ought to use it. Helps you to get familiar, even more familiar with what Copilot is all about. Both, however, are Microsoft tools, whether we're talking about the subscription, whether we're talking about Copilot for the web. The subscription, Microsoft 365 Copilot, however, that is specifically designed for business so that you don't have to be copying and pasting your sensitive information outside of your Microsoft environment into a web tool that is more easily accessible. In either case, whether the web version or the subscription, both of them allow you to be using AI. And therefore, that first phrase that you see there, consistent UI for AI, that is a true statement when we're talking about Copilot. It's also integrated in the tools that millions of us use every day. And we're talking about, as I've already mentioned, whether it's Teams or Outlook, whatever is a part of your Microsoft 365 subscription. OneDrive for Business, PowerPoint, and on the list goes. It provides a unified AI experience that works seamlessly across all of those applications. In addition to that, the productivity signals in Microsoft 365 are already there. You can also connect to additional business data sources, a CRM like Dynamics 365, for example, or you can add some plugins, make use of the plugins, or even Microsoft Graph connectors so that Copilot has access to data and information that is outside of your Microsoft environment. Point number 4, enterprise-grade security, privacy, and compliance. We can boil that down to enterprise data protection, which means that when you're using Microsoft 365 Copilot, your chat interactions are not saved unless you want them to be saved. Well, what does that mean? It means if you want there to be a history, there'll be a history. If you want that to be disabled, you can disable it. That is not an option that you have using the other AI tools that are out there. And when I say the other AI tools, I'm talking about things like ChatGPT, I'm talking about things like Gemini, Perplexity, Bard, IBM has one. There's all kinds, right? There's no shortage of AI tools. But what's consistent with them is if you're using them, there's a history that's going to be retained. In addition to that, as you're using them, the content that you paste into those technologies are likely going to be used to train their foundational models. When you're using Microsoft 365 Copilot, you're using it within your secure Microsoft boundary. And so that's why you have the option to retain a history or not. That's something that exists. That's a benefit of using Microsoft 365 Copilot. Flexible purchasing and deployment options. When Microsoft 365 Copilot first became generally available across the CSP world, meaning Copilot, CSP, Copilot, Cloud Solution Provider, CSP, Cloud Solution Provider. Is that something that you need to remember as a takeaway from this particular presentation and event? No, but Microsoft has their cloud platform program set up in such a way that certain partners can sell their cloud solutions. Maureen Data Systems is one of them. And what that means is that as new technologies become available from Microsoft, MDS will have access to position and propose and make these solutions and services available to you. Microsoft 365 Copilot became available in wide distribution back in 2024, January of 2024. And at that time, Microsoft said, this particular product, this particular service can be sold as a 1-year subscription billed annually. So you pay for it once upfront per year. And that's how it's available, how it's been available to pretty much everybody. And then this past December, Microsoft said, all right, we're going to introduce a second option for how our customers can purchase it. And that was to say it's still an annual subscription, but you can now pay on a month-to-month basis. So there are two options available to you as a potential customer. You can get Microsoft 365 Copilot as a 1-year subscription. That's universal. But you can choose to pay once upfront per year, or you can opt to pay per month, monthly billing. Be aware of this fact, though, that the monthly billing option is a little bit more costly, and your MDS rep can have that conversation with you. So the less expensive option is what I would leave you with. The less expensive option is the annual subscription billed once per year when compared to the cost of the annual subscription billed per month. But those are the flexible purchasing and deployment options that exist for you as you're looking at the different AI tools that are out there. That's what Microsoft has put in place so that you can take advantage of Microsoft 365 Copilot. And then finally, measuring the AI impact in business value. There are tools that allow you to do this. So once you commit to getting some Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses, how can you stay on top of who's using it to make sure that the people who are assigned a license are actually using it? Do you need to walk up to them each and every day and ask them the question, are you using it? I guess you could do that, but is that a good use of your time? There are tools, therefore, as an alternative that you can put in place to help you with that. Makes it easy for you to monitor and manage the use of this subscription. So those are the 6 points that I wanted to call out here to you today, and I hope that helps to further crystallize what you already knew, to affirm what you already knew, or maybe just providing you with new information. Maybe you weren't aware of some of those details. And so Microsoft 365 Copilot plus agents and Copilot Studio. Let me just ask this as a random question, because there's a word that I've introduced, agents. How many of you, if you want to just type in the chat or come off mute if that's available, or you can just type your answer in the chat. How many of you have heard of Copilot agents? Maybe you've just heard the phrase, don't know what it is, that's okay, but I just want to know who knows what. And if you don't know, share that as well, because I'm going to elaborate on it a little bit more so that we all have a basic understanding of that phrase and what these are. Copilot agents. Who wants to be bold and brave? And if not, that's all right. I can also take that as to mean that you're not aware and you're waiting to hear the punchline as to what these things are. Okay, no one is going to step forward, and that's all right. I'm going to share with you what Copilot agents are because they're very important to the capability of Microsoft 365 Copilot and how far you can actually go with this solution. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, it's an add-on. Why would you get that add-on? Because you want to integrate and add AI functionality to the Microsoft 365 apps that you already have. You work in Word, and up until now, perhaps you've become accustomed to copying Word content and pasting it into something like a Chat GPT and working with that out there because you recognize the power of AI is fantastic. I don't know that there are many people who would dispute that. It actually is a help. It's something that can help boost your creativity. It can help boost your productivity. And it's the usefulness of it is great. So whether it is ChatGPT or something else, you're copying and pasting into these technologies. Microsoft 365 Copilot allows you to reduce, if not eliminate, the need to be copying and pasting into these technologies because it adds AI to your already existing Microsoft environment. So you can work with AI within that environment. You don't have to be doing as much copying and pasting as before. The agents now are a subset, if you will, of Microsoft 365 Copilot. So imagine this, visualize this. You've got a pie, and let's say it's an apple pie because that's my preference, although I don't mind strawberry rhubarb from time to time, but a pie of your choice. Microsoft 365 Copilot reasons over the whole pie. And when I say reason, I'm saying the whole pie represents your Microsoft data and information. Copilot will reason or research, have access to the entire pie, all of your data and information within Microsoft, whatever is attached to your business premium license or your enterprise license, Copilot has access to that. All right. So that's what I'm talking about when I say it reasons over the whole pie. But let's say there is a slice of pie that you want Copilot to focus on. You want to limit its access to just a slice of pie. What you then would need to do is create a Copilot agent. A Copilot agent is something that you would create to say, Copilot, anytime you get these types of questions, you are only allowed to access this segment of information to provide an answer. That is how Copilot agents would work, and that is when and why you would create a Copilot agent. Copilot Studio actually represents the tools that are necessary to create the agent. So Copilot Studio is something that exists with your Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription. So if you get a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription, or if you already have a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription, you also have Copilot Studio. So you are all set to go and to get going creating Copilot agents. There is also a standalone Copilot Studio license that has a separate cost. The reason why you would go ahead and purchase the standalone license instead of just using the Copilot Studio that's included with your Copilot subscription is because you want to create Copilot agents that are more complex, maybe some autonomous Copilot agents, and it can become a lot more complicated and complex, and we're getting then at that point into the realm of developers, etc. So for the average user, you have a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription. Copilot Studio features are embedded as a part of that. That's probably going to be sufficient because you want to create an agent just for your internal use, something that employees and coworkers can access while they're in teams. You want to get more complicated and have Copilot agents created for things that are outside of your Microsoft environment, then you would look at getting a Copilot Studio. But in either case, Copilot agents are going to allow you to fine-tune the capabilities of Microsoft 365 Copilot. So instead of searching across everything that you have, you create a Copilot agent to search across a segment of what you have.
Microsoft 365 Copilot and agents will transform work and business process, helping you scale your impact like never before. Let's break it down. Copilot is your personal AI assistant. It knows you and your work. And think of agents as the new apps for an AI-powered world. They will automate every business process. Agents are created in Copilot Studio, a low-code tool for creating, managing, and connecting agents to Copilot or building your own. Soon, every organization will have a constellation of agents. And Copilot is how you'll interact with all these agents right in the flow of your work. It's the UI for AI. And if an agent needs clarification, it checks with you for direction. Agents will do everything, from accelerating lead generation and processing sales orders to automating your supply chain so you can optimize costs and grow revenue. The Copilot control system helps IT professionals confidently manage Copilot and agents securely. With Copilot and agents, you're in control, not just working with AI, but having AI work for you. Get started today and unlock the full power of AI with Copilot and agents.
So I'm hoping that provides a little bit more clarity. Do you need to be concerned about getting Copilot agents now or tomorrow type of thing? That's entirely up to you. The more important or substantive piece of the puzzle here is Microsoft 365 Copilot and why you ought to consider that over any of the other AI tools that are out there. But Copilot agents are something you can look forward to leveraging once you have a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription. All right, so hopefully this helps to clarify that. When you want Copilot to only focus and reason over a specific subset of your data, and here's a use case example. If you are in HR, or if you're in marketing, or if you are the legal professional for your particular organization, if you are in sales, if you're in finance, or any number of other department or specialized areas of your business, you have a role and responsibility that you need to uphold and fulfill so that the overall business continues to grow and be successful. But let's say in HR, for example, you're the owners of some very, very personally identifiable information, PII. But employees and coworkers will come to you or to your HR department to ask questions about vacations, time off, maybe salary questions, things of that nature. And if they've got a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription, they can type in their question, and then Copilot is going to scour all of your organization's Microsoft data and info to find the relevant info, to compile an answer in natural conversational language, and they'll get a suitable answer. The thing about that is Copilot is going to search everywhere. It's not just going to search HR or HR tools and resources. It's going to search everything. So maybe there's an email that someone in IT has that they received from HR. Well, no, that's actually not a good example. There might be something in the organization's SharePoint folder, right, that I as a user have access to, which is why Copilot would have access to it. And maybe it's outdated HR information about vacations. Maybe the vacation policy has been updated this year, but Copilot finds this outdated info from 5 years ago and incorporates that into the answer it's going to produce. HR could create a Copilot agent to ensure that Copilot is only going to be referencing HR monitored and managed data. So if I'm the HR manager, I'll say, okay, let's create an agent so that when people ask questions relevant to HR, that they're always getting the latest and greatest information in their response. So now Copilot, when the agent is created, the agent is going to be instructed to only reference specific data sources. Those data sources will be managed or monitored by HR. So it's always going to be up-to-date information. And when the user goes into Teams, for example, they're going to click on this newly created HR agent, and then they're going to proceed to ask their HR question. The agent is going to source that dedicated segment of information, compile the response, natural language as usual, and I'm going to get my response, and I can rest assured that it's the latest and greatest info. That would be a very rudimentary use case of how a Copilot agent would be of value. Within all of that, Copilot is still going to work based on what it's allowed to have access to and what it's not allowed to have access to, and I'm going to get to that. But that is, again, an example of where a Copilot agent would come into play versus not having a Copilot agent and just leveraging everything that Microsoft 365 Copilot has access to. And so Copilot is the UI for AI, because once you have a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription, you leverage the Copilot Studio features to create agents for different processes, and that allows for users to fine-tune their examples and use cases and getting more value out of Microsoft 365 Copilot. Now, from an ROI standpoint, a lot of numbers on here, but just in case you're an individual who would have appreciation for something like this, for everyone else, you can cover your eyes if, if that's something you want to do. But I just wanted to present this and it is a rudimentary example, but it happens to be an example that Microsoft offers in response to anyone who might ask a question that leans more to the financial side of things. How does this make sense to us financially? So the scenario for what you're seeing on the left, right, the scenario info you see on the right under scenario details. Number of licenses, let's say you're looking at getting at least 10 Microsoft 365 Copilot licenses. Maybe your organization is larger than 10, but you want to start, small. Perfectly okay. Have a layered approach, especially when it comes to adoption. You get some licenses for a specific group of people in your business, get them to commit to providing some feedback and what their learning experiences have been like. So when the next set of people get some licenses, their learning curve won't be as steep and perhaps even shorter. They'll have a quicker time to recognizing the benefits and values. But number of licenses, at least 10. Cost per license per year, $360. That's the MSRP, right? Roughly $30 a month. But in this scenario, you're just paying once upfront and renewing every year. So $360. Estimated time saved per employee, 1 hour per week. So where does that number come from? That comes from research and analytics that Microsoft has and what they have gleaned from their various polls and different feedback. And I've got the links at the bottom of the screen here. So if this is something that you wanted to dive into more after our event here today, the sources for this information I have provided. So this isn't anything that I have manufactured in my kitchen or anything like that. So estimated time saved per employee as per Microsoft's data and results works out to roughly an hour per week. So 4 hours per month. Average annual cost per employee. And so we're talking about salary and overhead and other things that factor into that, $70,000 per year. And so the summary, as you can see for yourself, total cost for 10 licenses over the course of the year, $3,600. Total cost savings per year, roughly $16,000. ROI, 348%. And you can massage the numbers to suit your own particular business. If you're looking to get more licenses or fewer licenses, come up with a rough estimate for cost per employee, et cetera. But I'm hopeful that this is something that you may be able to use as you are putting together a business case internal to your own organizations to further help justify the cost of Microsoft 365 Copilot. But here's the key differentiator. Cost important. Use cases and how you can use it and the benefits and the features, very important. But I'm going to suggest to you that what trumps all of that, what helps to make those other things matter, is the fact that your data and information is more secure in a Microsoft 365 Copilot world than it is with any of those other AI tools. Case in point, when it comes to shadow AI. Now, this is something that involves the use of AI tools that haven't been authorized or approved by an organization's IT department. So have you established within your own companies what your employees and coworkers are allowed to use versus what they are not allowed to use? What's compliant when it comes to AI tools? What have you determined is authorized for your staff to use? What have you determined is not authorized? What is non-compliant? Have you had that discussion? Have you gone through that process? You ought to do that, and MDS can assist where that's concerned. If IT has said no to a particular app and employees continue to use it anyway, they're engaging in shadow AI. And this is something that can lead to significant security and compliance issues because these are tools that operate outside of established protocols. If you have a Microsoft 365 business, you're standardized on Microsoft 365 or Office 365 even, right? Either. You have a person, you have people who have been designated, who are responsible, who are accountable for making sure that outside influences, outside people can't get at your sensitive information. It's a private environment. You want it to stay private, right? And you're using various Microsoft tools, maybe some non-Microsoft tools to help solidify all of that. So explain then why you would say, and maybe not you, but maybe someone else who's a part of this here today, why you would say, after putting in all that effort and all that time, making sure that the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, your employees and coworkers are working with sensitive info in Word, maybe exchanging emails internally with Outlook that include some confidential attachments or content, etc. All of that. Why would you now say that it's okay for employees who have a confidential Word document, they copy that and paste it into something like ChatGPT or one of the other AI tools? Why is that okay? Because understand this, you're going from a private environment, which you control, and you're saying, yes, it makes sense. It's okay to go ahead and copy that and paste it into a public arena where you have no control, where you don't decide what happens to that data while it's in those other technologies. Why is that okay? Why does that make sense? Because you are relinquishing control of that sensitive info. So when someone else using those technologies asks a question that's similar, they don't know anything about your business or what's been pasted there, but those foundational models, those large language models, are eating that up. They're training themselves on anything that's pasted into those tools. So someone else asks a question that is along the lines where that info is relevant to their question, right? So Gemini, here's my question, blah, blah, blah. I hit enter on my keyboard, and now it's going to scour the web and scour its own data sources. And the info that has been pasted in there from your business, if it's relevant to their question, will be incorporated into the answer that goes back to that unknown person. In addition to that, bad actors may get access to that because if you've pasted something having to do with mergers and acquisitions or financial records, right, stuff that shouldn't be out there, which is why you've got security policies and other things surrounding it, but now it's pasted out there, all of that goes into the wind. So wouldn't it be better if you could take the power of AI and bring it into your protected environment where you still have control, where you can now say, Copilot, you have access to this, but you do not have access to that. And more specifically, it's about the user. So if I have a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription And if I, as a user, have permission to this info over here, to access it and use it and see it, but I do not have permission to access and see this info over here because it's not relevant to my job, right? I can see this, can't access that. When I get a Copilot subscription, it will only have access to what I have permission to have access to. So it will access and see this and leverage that data where it's relevant to my question, but it doesn't have access to that because I don't. And therefore, anything I ask of Copilot, it's going to ignore that. It's never going to incorporate that into an answer. You don't have those kind of controls when you allow employees and coworkers to use other technologies. And understand this here as an additional point. This is not a statement to say never use those other AI tools. If you need to create wedding invitations, if you would like help planning a weekend vacation, if it is having to do with things that you don't need to keep a secret, use those. Beautiful, fantastic. But if the information is very important to your business to keep it secret and proprietary because it's proprietary, and you can't afford for other people to have access to that information, it's not prudent and sustainable to continue using those third-party tools. Microsoft 365 Copilot is designed for business, designed to leverage and make use of the security policies and permissions that you already have in place to protect the confidential information that you already have secured. It's going to inherit all of your security, your privacy, your identity, and compliance policies. These are just 3 stats out of the multitude of stats and other analytical information that Microsoft has processed and put together and provided. I like to show this, especially that one stat there on the left, 75% of people are already using AI at work. Now, this is a study from a study that was commissioned by Microsoft and revealed last year. And so a year later, it's possible that 75% is significantly higher, and likewise for those other 2 data points that you see there. Since it's a reality, right? It is a reality. Shadow AI exists. You want to make sure that you retain control over your data and how it's protected. You want to protect against things like data oversharing, data leaks, non-compliance usage, because you have important stuff that you decide, where you decide what's important. Like what's important and you need to keep confidential for your business, maybe different to another business, but that's for your organization to determine. Because you've got internal confidential data, customer data, partner and supplier data, and the list for your business is probably even longer. But these are things that need to stay protected, under your control. If you're going to copy and paste that stuff into those other third-party tools, you are relinquishing control. Why would you do that?
Microsoft 365 Copilot is transforming work with the power of generative AI. It's built on Microsoft's comprehensive approach to enterprise-grade security, compliance, privacy, identity, and responsible AI. Copilot automatically inherits your organization's Microsoft 365 security, compliance, and privacy policies, so you know your data is protected and always in your control. It all starts with your Microsoft 365 tenant. Data stored in your tenant is encrypted and only available to the users within that tenant. Your existing Microsoft 365 permissions and policies ensure that data won't leak between users and groups. And Copilot users only have access to data they've been granted permission to see in Microsoft 365, using the same technology customers have relied on for years. Your tenant sits inside the Microsoft 365 service boundary, where Microsoft's commitments to security, compliance, data location, and privacy are upheld. The Copilot large language models, or LLMs, that process your data sit within that same boundary, much like other Microsoft 365 services. Microsoft does not have eyes-on access, which means no one can view your data. Your data is not used to train the LLMs. And our EU customers can be confident that their data is processed within the EU data boundary. Microsoft 365 Copilot, enterprise-grade security and privacy for the era of generative AI.
And so one of the things you might want to consider is getting a Copilot readiness assessment done or a risk and compliance assessment done. If you are one of those businesses that actually has been proactive to make sure that your Microsoft security boundary is as tight and secure as possible, fantastic. You have been doing some good things. That's a best practice for sure, because your data is your data. So the more valuable you believe your data is, the more attention you're going to apply to making sure that it stays protected and safe and only accessible, first of all, to employees and coworkers relevant to their job, obviously. And if it needs to be shared externally, you're going to have some kind of governance around that as well. But an assessment would be useful because maybe there's a file or document out there somewhere that's been forgotten, and therefore IT doesn't know that they need to apply some kind of protection around that file or document. And when you get AI, whether it's Copilot or otherwise, when you introduce AI into your organization, you ask it to do something, it's going to access whatever it has permission to access. So if that forgotten file or document, people maybe have assumed it's been deleted, but it's not, it's still out there, it might be very old, but it might have some embarrassing information in it or other things that you wish truly were deleted and forgotten, but it's out there. You ask Copilot, for example, a question about XYZ. If the info in that particular file is relevant to your question, it's going to be included in the response. And the reason why is because there's nothing around that file that says you can't see it because it's been forgotten. So there's a gap that you didn't know was there. But now with AI, it's going to reveal what holes exist in your security boundary. An assessment will help to take care of that. You get an assessment done that's going to check, make sure that, that all of your files and documents are secure. They have some kind of policy related to it. Will also help to identify which SharePoint links have been shared externally outside of your organization, because those are security risks as well. Do those external people need to continue having access to your internal SharePoint files and documents? Yes or no? An assessment helps in all of those scenarios, and MDS can certainly help with that. But with the assurance that you've got the appropriate protections in place, you can certainly expect Copilot to work for you in a manner that's similar to this.
Microsoft 365 Copilot works with the data security controls you have in place for file access, labeling, classification, and data loss prevention. Mario Rogers works for Violet Martinez, and both are on the same team at Contoso. Mario and Violet are also members in the same group working on Project Falcon. Now we'll start with Violet, who's been working with the procurement and contract management teams to sell their partner ReliCloud 1,500 Mark 8 quadcopters. And you can see the file is labeled highly confidential with restricted access, and it describes all the terms in the purchase agreement. Because Violet has access to the file, she's able to search for and find it in SharePoint and Microsoft365.com. And of course, Violet can also navigate to the file's location in the Agreements folder of the project site to find the purchase agreement. So now let's look at Mario's experience. Even though he's on the same team and working on Project Falcon with Violet, if Mario tries to search for the Contoso purchase agreement, he won't find it. And there are a few purchasing documents that he does find without sensitive information, but not the one that Violet's working on. And if Mario knows the location of the purchase agreement and tries to navigate to it directly, it just appears as an empty folder to him. And when Mario launches Word on the web and creates a blank document, then prompts Microsoft 365 Copilot to summarize the Contoso purchase agreement as a reference file, because Microsoft 365 Copilot respects the file permissions of its user, Copilot also cannot access the purchase agreement. Now, if we switch back to Violet's screen, because she has permission to access the purchase agreement, she can use Microsoft 365 Copilot to summarize the file. And after a moment, you'll see it created a summary of the purchase agreement, and Violet decides to keep it. Then data security controls for Microsoft Purview discover sensitive information found in the Microsoft 365 Copilot generated content. The document is automatically labeled as highly confidential, and policies are enforced to restrict access to the document.
So the moral of the story here is you need to make sure, double check that the policies that are in place for each of the users in your organization, make sure that they are what they need to be, subject to a person's role and responsibilities. The policies in place for the office administrator probably shouldn't be identical to the policies that are in place for the owner or for the president, unless you want that to be the case. But I use that scenario or that example because obviously for the owner or the president or the CEO, there's certain information that they need to be able to see when it comes to, I don't know, forecasting or super high level stuff. For an office assistant, there are important things that that individual would need to see, but do they need to see necessarily the details of what, right, the top level person does? Anyway, I think you get the gist of what I'm saying here. So make sure that those things are in place for everyone in between, because whatever the policies are in place for me, once again, just to restate this fact, if I have access to this info here, but I do not have access to this info here, that will absolutely apply to how Copilot will work for me as a user. It's going to work within the boundaries that have been set for me. And that'll be the case for each and every other person. So for concerns that you may have, will Copilot be able to see sensitive information? It will if the user has permission to see that sensitive information. It's not going to overwrite anything. It's not going to create anything new. It's going to work within the boundaries that are already in place. And so that is how you need to view Microsoft 365 Copilot. 3 essentials for Microsoft 365 Copilot success. Just want to give you these ideas. And if you're already within this headspace, well, then that's great. But here's how you can boil things down in terms of your next steps and how you want to move forward, how you ought to move forward. Leadership needs to be involved here for sure. And I would say that the first point, the first bullet point, top-down sponsorship, absolutely critical. I don't know that this is something that will that is going to fly if it's a bottoms up. So individuals at the highest levels within your business need to be a part of this process. Business scenarios. You can assign a Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription to everybody. Everybody can get one. They'll find a use for it. However, is that the most prudent thing to do? Maybe identify, obviously, who's got a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 subscription, and then understand what some of the repetitive tasks are in their particular role, in their job. What are some of the things that they have to do, but maybe consume a lot of time, where if they could offload those things to AI or to Copilot, would free up some additional time for them to work on the other projects that require a little bit more heavy lifting. Those are the kind of conversations that you want to look at. Make it employee-centric. It becomes more valuable and more sticky, kind of like what, Crazy Glue or Gorilla Glue. and people will care more about it and will care to use it more willingly, more effortlessly if it is made specific to their job. And then technical readiness goes without saying. There's the user side for sure, but the technical readiness aspect is key to all of this because you want to make sure that your data and infrastructure are protected. All right, I see that we're just about end of job here, end of time. Let me show you an example of Copilot in action. Now, just because of time, rather than show you this example live, let me show you a recorded version of this Copilot demo, and it's an example of Copilot in Excel.
Copilot in Excel makes anyone a data analyst. Say you want to understand annual revenue trends, how each product is selling, which categories are performing best, and what's driving sales. To do that, you need to bring together data on product sales, pricing, and customer feedback. First, you import your data sources. Now you have a workbook with all the raw data you need in one place, and you can use Copilot to shape and analyze the numbers. Let's start by figuring out which category of your business is driving the most revenue. You know how to calculate that, but this sheet has 3 years of sales data, with thousands of rows showing sales by product by month. So while it's a routine task, this much data can be unwieldy. You can ask Copilot to quickly calculate monthly revenue by product. It knows how to do that, and which data to reference across tabs. Copilot creates a plan for how it will run those numbers, executes that plan, showing its work as it goes, and prompts you to ask questions or iterate on the solution it reached. It looks great, so you're ready to add that column to your spreadsheet. Now a new ask has come in, and you need to understand how each product category is performing and ensure that you are selling at least 100K in product in each category per month. Let's start by comparing sales by category. You ask Copilot to create a simple bar chart so you can quickly see which product categories are selling the best. And with conditional formatting, it highlights the product lines that aren't meeting the $100,000 minimum threshold, so you know where to focus. Now that we know which products aren't selling well, let's dig a little deeper and see what we can learn from the customer feedback. Copilot in Excel can now reason over text, like this raw customer data. Copilot analyzes all the customer feedback from the past quarter and surfaces the top 3 concerns. It looks like charging speed might be an emerging issue. Let's ask Copilot to highlight customer reviews that mention charging speed. Now, with the help of Copilot, you've taken a complex, disparate data set and quickly analyzed it, giving you a full picture of your revenue trends that you can bring to the upcoming business review.
And if you reply by saying, yeah, well, I can do that in ChatGPT or in Gemini, fantastic. That would be my response. Fantastic. But what if you're working with numbers and information that you wouldn't otherwise share with coworkers because it's not relevant to them? What if it's confidential enough that even within your own organization, you don't share those numbers with other people? And if that's the case, why do you think it's okay then to share those same numbers that others in the business can't see, but you're willing to share them in Gemini and Bard and all of those other public technologies? Why does that make sense? So we couldn't haggle over, well, I can do this in, those other AI tools. Copilot does this, but I can do this over here and I can do these other things. That's not a useful conversation. Why not then in that case, or here's what a person could do. You could just simply go out to a dollar store, Dollar General or something like that, and get a dartboard and get a list of all of the different AI tools that exist today. And there's no shortage of them. So I'm acknowledging that. There's no shortage of AI tools, but just put all the names on the dartboard, cover your eyes, take a dart, throw a dart at a dartboard, and whichever tool you hit, just use that. Because the distinctions between what they can do is very small because it's all AI. How you want to look at this is which of those AI tools is the most trustworthy for your data. for your business data, what potentially could be harmful to your business if your data were not appropriately protected. I just want to suggest once again that that is possible, or it's available for you to find a secure resource in Microsoft 365 Copilot, because rather than working with AI out in the public domain, you're now going to be working with AI in your protected and controlled Microsoft environment. And so let me turn it back over to Ray Watt, because I believe he's got some closing comments.
Thank you, Andrew, for the wonderful session. It was truly valuable. Now, before we end the day, I would really appreciate if you can all scan the QR code and fill in the information so that MDS can help you unlock the full potential of AI for your organization. The information that you fill will help us in scheduling a free strategy call on AI and Copilot with one of our experts. Or if you're interested to see, are you Copilot ready with a Copilot readiness assessment, we can do that for you. Or it could be anything related to Copilot Studio engagement that you want to do with MDS. We can also check, if you have Microsoft funding available for that.